Twisted by Diego Ramos.
My hand was covered in blood. I tipped my head back and pinched my nostrils together to stop the bleeding. I was almost at work and couldn't let the kids see me like this. Crap. I fumbled in my purse for a tissue and snagged one with a partially opened cough drop stuck to it. Little red dots splashed my green coat and the white concrete sidewalk outside the Montgomery Home for Wayward Youth. My stomach lurched a little. I couldn't stand the sight of blood ever since I saw my pet hamster get crushed when a neighborhood kid ran over it with his bike. I shivered at the thought and pinched my nostrils to stop the bleeding.
Just tell them you got into a fight. You'll gain massive points with them,
Stacy said from the doors of a 3-story red brick building that more resembled a shelled World War II hospital with boarded-up windows and crawling ivy, nature trying to cover the sight of its blight, than a place to take in vulnerable kids who lived on the streets. I hurried up the steps and entered with her. Clearly, from the amount of blood, I lost the fight, I said to my perfect roommate, the tall, fit, blonde bombshell who serves as the activity coordinator and youth center eye candy for the teenage boys. We clacked down the linoleum hall, nearing the sound of rowdy kids. Stacy handed me a travel pack of tissues and gave me a shoulder hug.
There's a new girl. She's 14. I'll send her over to you in a bit. You know you don't have to walk to work, right? Why don't you hitch a ride with me?
I like the exercise. Clearly I need it, I say and nod. But thanks. If I don't need a blood transfusion, I'll take you up on that offer tomorrow. We both laughed and parted ways as we each headed down a different hallway. The clock struck 8:30 a.m. I was in my cramped office. I barely had room to squeeze behind my desk with the rows of filing cabinets, boxes, and papers lining the moldy green-colored walls. I got good light from the 2 windows behind me, and hanging between them was a motivational meme poster. The one with the woman who is ugly crying, pointing at the offended white cat, and it said, "You're beautiful and you're going to love yourself above the lady, and geez fine, I love myself and deserve to be happy," above the cat. I think it's cute. The kids love it. My office was my little sanctuary where secrets and trauma are told. It was messy, but cozy, and big enough for me and the kids to fit. That's all that mattered. My nose had finally stopped gushing, and I looked over our new residence paper file at my desk. Rachel Monthane, 14, African American, found sleeping under an overpass, no diseases, found malnourished but healthy, limited schooling, parents deceased with no living relatives. I stopped for a moment to take in what was written in hastily scrawled lettering on the side margins. A chill crept slowly up my lower back as I read. Parents mutilated, muscles torn, shredded, organs and skeletons crushed. No external injuries. Blood was squeezed out of their orifices like a wrung sponge, and their necks had been twisted like rope. Their heads spun around and around and around, and I shut the folder. My stomach clenched at the disturbingly detailed notes. This was sick. I got angry after the nausea faded. Writing something like that was completely inappropriate, and it was a breach of medical professionalism. I checked to see who had reviewed the files last. I flipped to the last page and saw Stacy's signature. My mind went blank, and I froze. Stacy wouldn't have. There was a soft tap on my office door, and my thoughts crashed back into my body, like I had been unpaused. I brushed my uneasiness away. I decided I'd talk with Miss Perfect later today. "Come in," I call out. Rachel peeked in and hesitated. "It's all right, I don't bite, I only bark, and only when the other dog barks first." Rachel smiles sheepishly and walks in, taking a seat before me. Her sweater was 2 sizes too large, and her frizzy hair was tied into 2 cute buns.
"Hi, I'm Rachel. Are you going to eat those?"
She eyed my candy dish full of snack-sized Snickers. "Hi, Rachel. I'm Ms. Green, but my friends call me Emily." Oh, those? I was saving them for my new friend.
Oh,
Rachel's shoulders droop. Which is you, so go ahead. Rachel perked up and smiled. She grabbed a few and hastily unwrapped and ate them. She was a loud chewer. This was one of the best parts of the job. Showing these kids kindness and seeing their hearts light up little by little. It's why I went into the profession. So, Rachel, you're new here. How are you liking it so far? Everyone treating you okay? Rachel peeks up from staring at the empty wrappers in her hands and nods, and then looks back down. She has a faint smile. I continue. That's great, sweetie. We want you to feel welcome here, especially me. It's my job to make sure you feel safe and heard. So if you ever have issues with any other kids, or just need a friend to talk to, I'll always be here if you need me, okay? Rachel looks at me and nods, bashful now. She will fit right in.
Emily, can I ask you a question?
Sure. Fire away, I reply.
Have you ever seen someone die?
She crinkles and plays with the candy wrappers. I'm taken aback by the question. But I wasn't entirely surprised. After children encounter death, they sometimes become fascinated by it. They develop a morbid curiosity in order to understand and conquer the fear of the past event. I have. I was with my mother as she passed. It's a natural part of life, no matter the way it happens. Rachel's crinkling pauses.
Does it hurt?
I take a breath. This is getting heavy, fast. It can, honey. Did you want to talk about what happened with your parents? Rachel then did something that chilled me to the bone. She smiled. Big, wide, and full. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I leaned back in my chair. I couldn't look away, as if I were hypnotized by her large almond eyes.
They were having fun. They kept spinning like they had bugs in their clothes. It was funny. They liked dying. I want to have fun when I die, like them.
She dumped the candy wrappers on my desk and sighed contently, like she'd just had a nice cold glass of lemonade or something.
I liked talking with you. Can I go now?
Yeah, go on. But we're going to continue this conversation later, okay? I say, a small lump in my throat. She gets up and goes to the door.
Okay, bye.
She waves and closes the door behind her. My shock recedes and I get a grip on myself. I check my pulse. It's elevated. What the fuck is wrong with this day? And Rachel, poor girl. She's going to be a lot of work. I suddenly feel exhausted and look at the clock. Barely 10 minutes went by. I stand up to stretch and get ready for my next appointment when I see the wrappers Rachel had left on my desk. They were all twisted, like little bow ties, or like... I glance at Rachel's file. I exhale and my stomach clenches. A lot of work. I hadn't seen Stacy all day. The sun was nearly on the horizon, and the harsh orange sunset stung my eyes whenever I passed a window. I could hear kids chatting and yelling on the upper floors while I descended the creaking staircase. How this building is still standing is beyond me. I hear hurried footsteps at the bottom and see a quick flash of blonde hair before I step into the light of a window and the sun blinds me again. "Stacy!" I call out, squinting at the glare from the sunset and covering my eyes. The footsteps get quicker. She wasn't walking, she was running. I curse and hurry down the last steps and catch Stacy's hair and jacket fluttering out the double doors and quickly turning the corner onto the sidewalk out of sight. Something was wrong. Call it my gut or intuition. Something was up, and a cold worry crept behind my heart. I exit the school, fumble for my phone, and call her. I look down the sidewalk and road. She's gone. The line rings but goes to voicemail. I hung up and started down the street back home. I was going to give her a piece of my mind when I got home, unless something serious was going on with her. I bite my lip, and a cold breeze sweeps past me, fluttering dry red leaves like masses of running people across my path. I shiver and bundle my coat tighter. It's 5 p.m., and the last orange sheets of sunset have left the tips of the huddled buildings down the road. I can't help but think of what Stacy wrote in that folder and how she ran out of the building. I know she heard me. She'd never acted this way before. She was a model human. Beautiful, kind, friendly, and one of my best friends. I grow colder, but not from the wind. It would be dark by the time I got home. I pick up the pace. Night had arrived, and people crisscrossed the road here and there. Meandering shadows that suddenly grew when caught in passing car headlights, and then faded away to dark obscurity just as fast. I see my apartment building and jog up the steps to the front door. I glance at the second story and see my apartment window is dark. Was she even home? I grab my key card, swipe it, and rush up to the second floor. I get to my door, number 11, out of breath. I am about to unlock it when something in me makes me stop. It was that same feeling I had after reading what Stacy had written in the folder. My mind went blank, and all that was left was a worry that was now becoming fear. Christ. Get a grip, Emily, I admonish myself, unlock the door, and enter. I enter into darkness. No lights were on, and the apartment was silent. My mouth gets dry, but I continue with my daily habit. I dump my keys on the entrance table and drape my coat and purse on the kitchen chair. I notice Stacy's keys are not there either. Her jacket isn't on the couch, her favorite dumping spot for her purse and heels. I was always accidentally getting too friendly with those shoes whenever I sat down. Usually, the small home was warm with tea brewing and the TV on whenever either of us got home first. But today, it was cold. I flicked the lights on. "Stacy, are you home?" I shouted towards her room. Not a sound. I kicked my shoes off and went to knock on her room door. No lights shone from beneath it. No reply. I sighed, partly in relief and partly in worry. Maybe she was just late for a date or some kind of appointment. There was probably a home game at the local basketball gym that she needed to get to. She was a volunteer basketball coach for a local youth girls team. I laugh at myself for worrying for no reason and slump into the kitchen chair. Our small 60s-style table creaks a little from resting my arms on it. I might need to talk to my therapist about today. A cold breeze blows through the living room and pelts me like I've splashed water on my face. I see the window is open and rush across the living room. Red leaves gathered on the windowsill swirl all around me and scatter through the apartment like splattered paint. I slammed the window shut. Suddenly, a horrific realization dawns on me, and my stomach tightens. My pulse quickens as my hands get clammy. I looked up at our living room window before entering the building. It was closed. I quickly grabbed my phone from my purse and opened up the Location Spotter app. It's an essential safety precaution for women these days to give access to their family or friends so they can be tracked in case of emergencies. I thumb down the brief list of names and click Stacy's profile, her smiling face looking back at me. The GPS map screen pops up and the little tracker marker blinks to show me her location. My mouth goes dry and I slowly turn to look down the dark hallway connected to the living room. The marker shows she's in the apartment. "Stacy, are you he?" Suddenly, a long, piercing, tortured scream stabs the apartment's silence. The blood drains from my face and my heart races. It was coming from Stacy's room. "Stacy!" I shouted and ran to her room, only to be stopped by the locked door. Her screams intensify and she wails from behind the door. She barely breathes before stabbing the air again and again with her terror and pain. I bang on the door and wrench at the doorknob, hoping my desperation will somehow unlock it. "Stacy, open the door! It's locked!" Open the door, I cry. Tears are now falling down my cheeks. I try to break open the door by slamming into it with my shoulder and yelp from the pain. Emily, help! Stacy's scream gargles. I hear a loud thump and then repeated banging on the floor as if she was tossing and turning. I cry and shake the doorknob harder, but my strength was failing. I hear dull, snapping sounds and faint popping rips. An image of rope unwinding and snapping flashed in my head. Stacy wailed again in a way I'd never heard her do, or ever heard any human make before. It chilled my blood, making every hair on the back of my neck and arms stand on end. A sound that would shred vocal cords, empty lungs, and pour every remaining shred of life into it in order to convey, I'm in the worst pain imaginable. Make it stop. And then, like whatever was doing this to Stacy heard her request, her scream was pinched off, and the thumping stopped. I stood in silence, frozen, waiting for another sound, another shriek of pain. But nothing came. Tears and snot dripped from my face. Stacy, I whispered. My breathing became ragged and labored. I had to get in. With the cold, deafening silence growing louder, I rushed into the kitchen and clanged through the cabinets to grab a cast iron pan. I wielded it like a hammer and bashed the doorknob off, and then broke the door open with another shoulder ram. The door swung open into the dark room. The only source of light was from her phone lying face up on the bed. I didn't manage to get a word or breath out. A razor-sharp grip of horror squeezed every organ in my body. My skin got cold. In the dull electronic glow of her phone, I could see a mangled, seeping lump of shadow on the floor. I dropped my pan and screamed. The red and blue lights reminded me of Christmas for some reason. Stacy had always thought that was weird. And I always thought it was weird she liked to mix eggnog and punch. We agreed we were both weird and laughed about it.
And that was the last time you spoke with her?
The officer asked. I nodded, numb. The officer scribbled something on his little notepad. From the kitchen, I heard the squeaky rolling of a gurney. It rolled towards the front door, carrying Stacy with a white sheet draped over her, or whatever was left of her. The shape underneath that bright white cloth wasn't human-shaped, not anymore. Everything was sluggish, the police moving in and out of the apartment, the camera flashes going off in Stacy's room. All I could do was look at the kitchen floor. Blood. It had mixed with the red leaves. It was everywhere. She was going to be a lot of work. 2 weeks had passed. The funeral was large, and the church was filled with her family, friends, acquaintances, the children, of course, and even the mayor. That was surprising, but not really. Stacy was an active member of the community and the loveliest human you could meet. She attended all the city functions and rubbed elbows with whoever she needed to in order to get funding for her nonprofits. It's partially how the youth center where I work got off the ground. She made the world a better place. Her funeral was so well attended, you'd think she was a celebrity. But her death was unspeakable, unfathomable. I couldn't wrap my mind around what I had seen that night. And every time I tried, my heart would clench and I'd want to throw up. I blocked it out and shoved the horror deep into a distant place in my soul. I sat on the couch with a hot cup of tea, looking out at the early morning dawn. Tomorrow was my first day back at the center. I had stopped crying after the first week, and I'd stopped feeling like I was about to vomit a few days ago, so I was totally fine. It didn't matter, really. Bills had to be paid regardless of my mental state. I got up and went to the kitchen to wash my cup. The cleanup crew had done a decent job of scrubbing the apartment down. Like death had never knocked on my apartment door. There was one thing, though. It was a gnawing thought that kept eating my insides bit by bit. like a centipede chewing through my stomach. If I was going to move on and live a life without her, I had to satisfy my unease. I had to get some kind of closure for what happened that night. The police had no explanation. I had to try to find one, for her family, for me. I went to her door. The knob was missing and crime scene tape still dangled listlessly on the frame. I took a deep breath and entered. The darkness was stark compared to the morning light in the hallway, and the odor of bleach enveloped me. I winced and turned the light on. I feel a lump in my throat forming, but I swallow it as I walk through Stacy's room. It was tidy and studious. A bed with a white duvet and rose-pink pillows occupied the middle of the room. Sheer curtains covered a window on the far side, just above a desk that was pillared with bookshelves on each side. Books and trophies filled them. There are pictures of her basketball team, youth center kids, and her family. I smiled and grabbed one of me and her, clinging to each other and beaming in front of the Storia Hotel on our trip to Spain. I wiped away a tear and kept searching. Her family hadn't taken anything yet. It was too painful to enter the place she died, most likely. They were paying her half of the rent, which I appreciated, despite my protests. I sniffed and checked her night tables. The drawers had journals, moisturizers, and sleeping masks. I checked the journals. I felt awkward reading them. I silently told her I was sorry and skimmed through them. They were private musings about her days, notes about the dreams she had, or midnight brainstorms for new philanthropic ventures. Damn it. Another tear. I was about to close the journal when the last page flashed at me. I stopped and turned to it. That same feeling I had on the night I found her crept back into my heart. Scrawled on it was a poorly drawn stick figure with a tortured round face and black pits for eyes. Its body was a tangled clump of squiggles. I ran my fingers over it. The pen strokes had dug into the paper. Flashes of that night and how I found her hit me. I nearly gagged but soldiered on. I turned back a few pages and saw a word manically written and rewritten on top of itself over and over. Twisted. I snapped the journal shut and tossed it back in the nightstand drawer. I slumped down on the bed, breathing hard. My heart rate was up. Twisted? That word, more than the freaky drawing, disturbed me. That word fit into the gaps of my memory like a forgotten glyph on some ancient temple that would finally piece together an ancient language. But now I had to translate it. Why did it feel so important? Why was it important to her? I sighed and sat up. Maybe she just had a mental breakdown. Maybe she took some drugs and they drove her insane. I was about to get up when I noticed something on her desk. She didn't have a desktop computer, only a laptop. So she would store it on the keyboard tray to keep her desk looking tidy. And in there, I saw something red. I pulled the keyboard tray out and found a candy wrapper on her laptop, a twisted candy wrapper. That word. That theme. Rachel's candy wrappers. Stacy's description in the file. Her death. Rachel was connected to Stacy in some way. My sadness turned to anger. I will be having a lengthy conversation with Rachel when I get back to work tomorrow. I tucked the wrapper in my pocket, sat down at the desk, and opened her laptop. I turned it on and waited for it to boot up. The dim morning glow was becoming yellower with the rising sun. I could see some people walking down the sidewalk bundled up. One person snapped their gaze in my direction and looked at me. I locked eyes with him. My neck prickled, and I abruptly leaned back to sever the connection. I shook off the strange interaction and focused. The computer booted, and I automatically entered her desktop. No password was needed to log in. That was just like her. I spent a few minutes going through her folders and checking files. Nothing out of the ordinary. There were financial statements and reports. I found a folder labeled Youth Center and clicked into it. Another subfolder was titled Kids. Inside, there were evaluation notes for each child. This information was different from the hard copy folder I saw. These were Stacy's personal thoughts. I quickly scrolled until I found Rachel and clicked the Word document. I swallowed as I waited for the document to open. My mouth had gone dry. A high-pitched scream pierced me through the window. I jerked back into my chair, startled. Kids were playing outside as a mother tried to wrangle them into a van. Fucking hell. The document was open now. I began to read. Rachel Monthane, 14 years old. A very sweet child who loves candy. She's really shy, might have cavities. Will need to schedule a dentist appointment. She loves Billie Eilish and some Korean boy bands. Once you break through her shell, she's very talkative. I do worry that she is repressing her grief. Her parents' deaths only 3 months ago don't seem to be dampening her mood. Kids with similar experiences who are new to the center are usually much more depressed. I'll ask Emily to dig into any possible compartmentalizing Rachel may be doing. She did tell me about a website she likes to visit. She said she can talk to her parents there. Delusions? Possible schizophrenia? We'll look into the website. Twisted dot parts. There it was again. That damn word. I sucked in a sharp breath and opened the browser, but I didn't type the address yet. I wanted to check Stacy's history to see if she had visited it. There it was, logged as having been visited the day before her death. My hands were shaking from the adrenaline. I typed the website in and hit enter. The entire computer screen went black. I sat motionless, holding my breath. Had the computer died? The screen then went a dark shade of red, and 2 big, bright yellow eyes peeled open and looked at me. Their black irises were nothing but swirling black pits. My head began to itch with the cold perspiration of growing anxiety. Between the eyes, a bedroom door appeared. Its handle dangled, broken. I gulped and clicked to enter. The scene moved me forward as the door creaked open. The environment turned into a 3D hallway, all bathed in an eerie red light. Nothing happened until I clicked down the hallway to move forward. The scene walked down the narrow path. I felt my stomach tighten. The walls were covered in dark red stains. Creaking floorboards groaned as I moved. All along the hall were doors to the left and right. Muffled sounds, barely audible through the laptop speakers, came from behind them. Rachel told Stacy about this website. What the hell? I was starting to feel sick. A heavy buzzing grew louder in my head, like pressure at the start of a headache. But I had to see this through. I clicked on the first door. The scene whirled to the door, and it slowly opened. Inside was a pixelized polygon kitchen, the kind of graphics I remember seeing on my Nintendo 64 with Mario 64, or PlayStation with Tomb Raider, angular and pointed with no round surfaces. The kitchen had white countertops, and in the center, a black man and woman stood with their backs to me. They were angular and geometric, but that didn't stop the horror I felt. They slowly turned, their faces glitching between screaming and crying, like a broken computer program, and they kept turning and turning and turning. Their torsos twisted into a tight coil until their waists burst and the white kitchen was covered with a fine red mist. I couldn't catch my breath. I couldn't think. I wanted to shut the laptop and run to my room and lock the door, but I couldn't move. I couldn't take my hand off the mouse. My breath quickens even more, and I feel myself panic. I click out of the room and the view backs out and closes the door. I groan and try to pull my eyes off the screen. I can't. It's like I'm paralyzed. I try screaming, but no sound comes out of my throat. In my periphery, I notice the bright morning sun dim along with the lights in the room until there's nothing but darkness besides the red glow of the laptop. I try to get my breathing under control. This isn't real. I'm just having a waking nightmare. Sleep paralysis is a real phenomenon. That's all this was. It was early in the morning, and I must have somehow dozed off suddenly. But I could still move my hand and click. On the screen, a distant door further down the crimson hall swung open. "Help me!" a labored, delicate voice called. I recognized it right away. It couldn't be. My panic vanished for a second, and I forced myself to focus. I regained my composure and clicked on the open door. The scene moved to it and rounded me into the room in a jerky motion. I sucked in a long breath as soon as I saw the scene. Stacy was on the floor of her bedroom, the room I'm in now. Her polygon face warped between tortured pain and teary-eyed hysteria. Her body was contorting on the floor beside her bed, crumpling slowly inward and then outward. Tears welled up in my eyes. "Oh God, Stacy, no." I heard a voice say, it might have been mine. I couldn't tell anymore. Stacy begged for help. I tried clicking on her, but it did nothing. Her body kept folding on itself until bursts of red sprang from her like fountain streams. I cried out to her. The room went a shade of red. Her body stopped moving. I wept and felt the tears on my cheeks, but I made no sound. Instead, I heard my weeping coming from the laptop speakers. There on the screen beyond the bed at Stacy's desk was a pixelated me, hunched over her laptop. I sat transfixed at the sight of myself. I was wearing the same clothes, a gray cardigan and green pajamas. "No, no, no, what is this? Stop it! Stop it!" I heard my pixel self scream. The scene moved me forward to the desk, right behind me. In that moment, I felt hot air brush against the back of my head, rustling my hair. It smelled rancid, like rotting food. It would blow and pause. Something was heavy breathing. My heart stopped. Tears were streaming down my cheeks now, and Stacy's laptop wailed at me with my own crackling voice. And then suddenly, the head of my computer self snapped around to face me, twisting and breaking her neck in the process. Her expression was pure shock, and behind her in the dark window, 2 yellow eyes reflected off the glass. In that second, I was compelled to gaze up at the window here in Stacy's real room. 2 glowing yellow eyes glared at me, hanging like 2 distant lanterns just above my head. They tilted and then warped into a smile. My breath stopped, and I felt my eyelids flutter before it all went dark. A scream woke me up. I flinched back in my chair and gawked around, trying to peel my eyelids open and focus through my groggy vision.
"Miss Green, are you ready to see me?"
Jeremy, a freckled boy with curly hair, called from my office door. What? How could I be at work? I could tell it was the middle of the day from the sun shining through the window behind me. My cluttered office was just as it had always been. I was anxious, nauseated by the flood of memories now pouring into my brain about that website. Was it all a dream? A very vivid, horrible dream?
"Miss Green?"
Jeremy asked again, puzzled. I swallowed the memories and snapped back to focus on my little patient. "Yes, Jeremy, come in." I paused when I noticed the twisted candy wrappers on my desk. Rachel's candy wrappers.
"So, Bobby is taking my snacks, and I want him to stop."
Jeremy started, sitting down in the chair before me. I nodded and listened, taking my mind off the fear and dread inside me. At least for now, I wanted all the problems I had to be only as big as Jeremy's. I made it through the workday without incident. I managed to get through all the concerned looks, shoulder touches, and condolences. For the day, it was a memorial service, and I was the grieving widow. Although everyone loved Stacy, just seeing me would make the other faculty well up, which would make me get glassy-eyed. It was exhausting. The day was turning to night, so I packed my purse up but paused. I still needed to talk to Rachel. I loathed the idea. It made my stomach knot up, but I needed to understand why she told Stacy about that website. A shiver ran down my back. I rubbed my neck. It was progressively getting more sore throughout the day. I'm sure it was due to unbelievably bad sleep quality last night. I grabbed my cell phone and called Donna, the headmistress. She lived on site to take care of the kids, along with a support staff. She would know where Rachel was bunking. Kids get moved around a lot due to new arrivals. The phone clicked and Donna answered. "Hi, Donna. It's Emily." "Yes, it's good to hear your voice too. Thank you. It was a hard time." "No, I'm as good I can be." "Not really, but thank you. I actually called because I wanted to know which room Rachel was in. I needed to ask her." "What?" My heart froze. "Please, Donna, I don't have the energy for teasing. I had a session with her before that night. Donna, this isn't funny." I was starting to feel dizzy and my heart was racing. "I'm telling you she was here. I have her file. Stacy made notes in it. Can you please check? No, I'm not saying you're a... Can you please just... Thank you. Yes, Rachel Monthane." I heard the clacking of keyboard keys on the other line. Nothing. How far back? A year. This can't... How is this... Yes. Okay, I will. I'm sorry. My mind must still be shaken. Thank you. Take care. I hung up and bore a hole into the top of my desk with my eyes. My heart was racing. This wasn't me. Have I lost my mind? Was Rachel a dream too? But Stacy wasn't. The candy wrappers were still there, little laughing, dangerous relics that taunted my sanity. My heavy breathing made them jostle. My neck ached more. I snatched them up and threw them in the trash. I went to the nearest file cabinet and flung open a drawer. Her file would have the proof. There it was. Rachel. I flipped through its pages like I was a half-starved animal. The pages were all blank. My neck throbbed and my brain felt like a stop sign picked up by a tornado. Flickering red and spinning and flashing. Stop, stop, stop. I could feel the warmth of the last bit of sun leaving my back through the window. My body felt heavy, weak. My fingers couldn't hold the folder, and I let it fall to the floor. I needed help. I grabbed my purse and left, the entire world a molasses blur. I hugged my coat tighter. It was dark now, and a chilled wind blew through the streets. The amber glow of the streetlights lit the road and buildings like a dungeon corridor lined with torches. I focused on the cold and tried to ignore the throbbing ache of my neck and head. It would be a 10-minute walk to my apartment. I should just buy a car. The moon was full, and it cast the gaps the streetlights couldn't reach in a soft blue. Other huddled people breezed by me on the sidewalk. I winced whenever someone passed. For some reason, my neck tightened. I felt an overwhelming impulse to turn to face them whenever someone was nearby. I couldn't explain it. It was like I couldn't resist my head's desire to turn to face them, like its movement was out of my control. But I just added it to the growing pile of insanity I was going through today. Maybe I was insane. That thought made tears sting my eyes. I wiped them away. Suddenly, my purse rang. I grabbed my phone. It was Mom. My heart felt relieved for a second. Like I'd just been embraced by a warm hug. I could use my mom right now. I sniffed and answered. "Hey, Mom, I'm glad you called. I need some help," I said.
I heard you were looking for me.
A young girl's voice answered back. I stopped in my tracks, and my breath caught in my throat. My heart clenched, and something colder than the wind bit the back of my neck.
Hello, Ms. Green. Are you there? I know you're there. You can't hide from me.
It was Rachel. I could barely find the strength to speak. My throat was closing. "How did you get my number? Where's my mom?" I stammered. I heard a groan from the other end of the line. It was dark and deep. Not a little girl.
Those are boring questions. I don't know where your mom is. Wherever you last left her, I guess.
The girl was back and sounded annoyed.
I don't care about her. I care about you. You're my new friend. I hardly get any new friends, so let's have lots of fun, okay?
She said. That low, heavy breathing came back. I could almost feel the hot breath sting my ear through the phone. A spark of fight flickered inside me after she finished talking. Even if this was all in my head, I had a chance to get information. "Who are you, and why are you screwing with me?" I yelled. People walking by glanced at me, concerned. My neck shot with pain. I had to resist the irresistible desire to look in their direction. I clenched my teeth at the effort.
Better question.
I heard clapping.
I'm just a bored, twisted little girl. And you're my sweet piece of candy. A wonderful flavor. So much desperation.
Rachel's squeaky voice morphed low and growled.
I'm enjoying unwrapping you.
The voice echoed in my skull like feedback from a mic too close to an amp. I hung up and clutched my head, panting as the echo turned into a rumble. The street lamps dimmed and the darkness crept in. The icy blue took over. People still walked by, noticing my panicked, hunched form. Stop, stop, stop. And then the lights flashed off, and the street was encased in cold blue. I grunted. My head felt like it was going to split in two, but then through my squinted eyes, I saw a wall of shadow sweeping towards me, swallowing up the buildings and street, blocking the moonlight as if a giant plane were passing overhead. I looked up at the moon. The pain in my head vanished, and I felt my face contort in horror. Terror ran through me. All the cars, footsteps, honks, and city life sounds went mute. The moon was no longer a glowing celestial body, but an eye with pulsing red veins and eyelids titanically closing in a slowed blink. Its pupil was fiery and spun with red and black flames. I knew I was screaming. I could feel the vibration in my throat. In that moment, its eyelids touched, and the walls of darkness silently clapped close, right down my middle. The world turned pitch black, but as soon as the darkness enveloped me, it drifted away. But now, instead of blue light, red light glowed from the opening eye. The world turned red like that hallway on the website. People started gathering around me. They were dark and empty. I couldn't see their faces. I could only see pinpoint yellow holes for eyes staring back at me. My neck muscles wailed and creaked as I tore through the crowd, again wanting to meet every stare as if hands were trying to force me to look. The dark shadows stumbled out of my way, throwing their hands up. I didn't care. I didn't look up at the sky or at any people. I kept my vision on the sidewalk ahead of me and ran as fast as I could to my apartment. The frigid air pierces my lungs with each labored breath. The car headlights cast the red light out momentarily with each pass, returning things to normal. It was something small and fleeting, but I hung on to it with all my sanity. It was my rock as the moon pumped red into every shadow. And the sounds started. Distant screams at first, then chopping sounds closer, and finally wailing all around me. I heaved, trying to suck in enough air to keep me from hyperventilating. I dialed 911. I couldn't manage this anymore. To my shock and relief, a normal, calm lady answered. I couldn't hear my voice, but I felt my mouth making the right shapes, and the call taker understood me.
Okay, Emily. We're getting units out to you. Find a place to sit and focus on.
I dropped the phone and slumped down on an apartment building stoop. Was it mine? I couldn't tell anymore. The pain of the tortured wailing was shredding my eardrums. I clutched my ears to soften the torment. They were warm and slick from something. The red bleeding eye in the sky became blurry, just as red and blue lights screeched to a halt before me. Oh, thank God. Christmas was here. The nightmare had ended. They had given me antipsychotics and tranquilizers to calm me down the night before. All I remember was trying to scream and to look away from the twisted, dark faces of the police and nurses trying to help me. I glanced at the bright morning sun beaming through my hospital room window. I could see the blue sky and tips of green trees. Color. I never would have imagined I'd be grateful to have my color spectrum back. But realizing how grateful I was for something so simple only made me remember what was happening to me. Dread and hopelessness flooded my mind. I shifted in my bed and adjusted the hospital gown I was wearing. I held my wrist up and looked at my hospital wristband. It had my name, blood type, and age. My human form boiled down to a few lines of data, but behind that data was horror. A horror that kept following me. I was in hell. Somehow, my mind was broken. Somehow, that website had broken my mind. I wished I'd never opened Stacy's laptop. I wish I'd just not cared and just let her death remain a mystery. Although it still was a mystery, I had a better idea now, but no answers. Hallucinations? Paranormal? Demonic? I didn't believe in demons or ghosts. I'm a counselor. I am trained in dealing with the mind. But I didn't ingest any toxins or drugs. All I did was go to a fucking website. I huffed and held back a whimper. I stared at the white-tiled ceiling and relished in the silence for a moment to let that urge to sob drift back down from my throat into my chest. Is my life over? Am I broken forever? I whispered to myself. I thought about calling Mom, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. This would ruin her day. Her life. I didn't want to do that to her. I wanted her to have a normal life for as long as possible. In that moment, I wished she had a different daughter, one who wouldn't do this to her. I sighed and a few tears fell. But I wouldn't go down crying. That flame of anger and resilience I had on the phone the night before flared up. I wouldn't let this freakish shit take me out. I was going to fix myself. I'd conquer this hellscape and become normal again. I swore it. I felt better after my pep talk. I heard birds chirping outside and a normal nurse muttering from outside the door. I was perfectly normal right now. This was the world I was going to fight to stay in. I was going to beat this. I was going to figure this out. This was the start of my comeback story. I had a small smile on my face. The door opened and the nurse walked in.
Hello, Emily. How are you feeling this morning?
She asked. My grin fell away as my head snapped to meet her. The nurse, an average woman of average height, brown hair, and hazel eyes, started morphing into something horrific. Her skin turned black like she was being charred from a blowtorch, and she started growing in size but thinning in frame. Bony and anorexic with sharp white bones tugging and ripping out of her joints like her skin wasn't big enough to cover her anymore. I began to tremble at the hellish sight and scrunched up my bed, trying to shrink away. And then her eyes, nose and mouth, slowly moved to the center of her face, her skin ripping and sucking itself to a fine point until blood, muscle, and skull crumbled gruesomely inward into a dark, swirling pit, like a black hole with its maw threatening to suck all light into its endless depth. A low, drumming hum welled up from the floor. The nurse's lanky, charcoal body craned over the bed, and her sharp, long fingers reached out to grab me. I tried to hold on to my sanity, but my terror shrunk every thought into one word. Run! I screamed and leapt out of bed and ran out of the room. The demon's howl followed. I sprinted down the hallway, my medical gown flowing behind me like a poorly fitted gala dress. I hoped to see normal people in the halls, but no. Only demonic creatures slinked out of rooms or hobbled from around hallway corners. I tried shutting my eyes, but my head, once again beyond my control, snapped to each gaze as I passed. It took all my strength and will to wrench my head away from their eyes. My neck was screaming at the involuntary movement. I zoomed past another creature that clawed at me, barely missing me. My tears welled up. I had to get somewhere isolated. I had to be alone. Just as I ripped my gaze from another creature, I saw the exit sign for the stairs. I beelined for it and burst into the stairwell. Empty. Blessed solitude. I flew down a couple of flights and stopped to catch my breath. I hadn't noticed the ice-cold floor burning my feet, or the chill that now crept up my naked backside. I couldn't live like this. And my head. Why did it keep snapping to meet each pair of eyes I encountered? I could barely control it now. I rubbed my neck with my hands. I decided that I was possessed. I need a church. Every horror movie used a priest to exorcise a demon. I had to try it. Above me, a door slammed open, and footsteps started rushing down. Snarls and growls grew louder. The scared rabbit in me awoke, and I continued my sprint down the stairs. My feet slapped hard on the first-level landing, and I blew through the exit door to the outside. Alarms went off in the building, but the piercing shriek faded as I hauled ass across the parking lot and ran onto a grassy strip. The bright sun warmed my face, and I took a large gulp of chilly air. I got my bearings. I needed to go north towards the closest church. I could see its steeple poking up from the distant buildings of the city. Its faint bells rang. It felt like it was calling me. A small spark of hope flickered inside me and drove me forward. I ran at full speed out of the grass and onto the sidewalk and slashed across the streets to make a direct path to the church. Cars honked, and the few creatures that littered the sidewalks roared and screamed at me. I winced in pain as I resisted looking at them. The bells were getting closer, but so was the sound of heavy, haggard, wet breathing. I glanced over my shoulder and only saw the faint trace of something large and black turning the corner after me, chasing me. I could feel the fear clawing at my nerves, making my hair stand on end. If I stopped moving, it would catch me. I cried out and put all my energy into putting one foot in front of the other. My feet were racked with pain, raw and slick. They were probably bleeding. I tracked the church steeple and saw it was a few blocks away. Its gleaming cross was visible high in the blue sky, glinting gold like a star calling me to follow it. I pummel full speed around a corner into a swarm of voices and bodies, a city center festival. I'm running so fast I can't stop and crash into a pile of people. They yell and tumble with me as we roll into the street. I smash hard into the asphalt and feel as if the skin is scraped off my elbows and knees. Angry yells erupt and then abruptly quiet. I lay face down. The murmuring of the crowd slowly turns into hissing and animalistic growling. I feel my body tense and muscles contract. Pressure squeezes me from all sides as if I'm being crushed from the inside. I feel my head pulling upward. No, 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 no. Get away, I whisper. Stop looking at me. A clawed hand grabs my shoulder, but I slap it away. My heart races and my mind floods with panic and terror. Don't look at me, I scream at the top of my lungs. I didn't recognize my own voice. It was desperate and tortured. Racked with the slicing horror of mortality, it was Stacy's voice. I lost my concentration, and my head snapped up to the nearest pair of eyes. Normal, human eyes. All their faces were normal. I felt a drip of relief, but it was quickly dashed as I lost control of my body. I got to my feet before my head whipped to the next pair of eyes directly behind me. I barely managed to turn my body to follow. My muscles constricted more, and I suddenly couldn't move my feet. My heart dropped into my stomach in terror. My head snapped back and forth in rapid succession, locking onto each pair of eyes looking at me. There were hundreds of people in the crowd now. I felt my neck crack as it turned beyond its normal limits. I screamed, and the world blurred and stopped, only to focus on someone's gaze, and then blur again to snap on another person's. In the frenzied whirlwind, it stopped on those two yellow eyes. They were gleeful. And then they were gone. I thrashed as hard as I could to reach out and grab someone, but my muscles were tightening like drying cement around my bones. I felt my face flush and cold sweat break out on my forehead. I was helpless. My scream turned into a pained gurgle as my head spun 360 degrees and my breath cut off. Pain like a knife cut into my spine. The sound of baritone snapping resonated in my ears, followed by the rushing sound of a river filling my head. My vision was dotted with blood, and I saw my arms twist like the candy wrappers Rachel left on my desk. My skin ripping into bloody, jagged lines. I saw splintered white pop through. People screamed and gasped. And then I fell. My body, wet with dripping blood, made a pathetic slapping sound. My legs jerked up at the knees, snapping into slowly curling lumpy branches, like the stems of a withering plant. The curling shoes of the Wicked Witch from The Wizard of Oz crossed my delirious mind. Between the growing red dots in my vision, I saw the church's cross glint high above the crowd. I was so close. The last thing I heard were distant screams and the creaking tension of my tearing muscles before my eyes popped, and a silent, final darkness enveloped me. Detective Dunn swung the morgue doors open and wiggled his unkempt mustache in reaction to the musty chemical smell.
Peterson. Dr. Miguel. This her?
Dunn said to the two men in the room. Peterson was another detective dressed like himself, dark blue dress pants, white-collared dress shirt, and a gray coat. Dr. Miguel looked up from the woman's corpse and grimaced. Dunn did the same thing as he approached the autopsy table.
Fucking hell.
Dunn muttered.
I know. Looks like she bounced around inside a blender.
Peterson said.
A little respect, detectives.
Miguel chastised and took his latex gloves off over the nearest sink.
Sorry, Doc. So, what's the cause? Car accident? Fell off a building?
Peterson said. Dunn noticed a laptop with an evidence tag on the nearby counter. The victim's, no doubt.
Neither.
Dunn said, beating Miguel to it.
Same as the other victim, I'm guessing?
Miguel only nodded, perplexed.
You talking about the Twisted case, Dunn?
Peterson asked, and joined Dunn in looking over the victim's mangled corpse.
Yeah. Stacy Caden was found in a similar state in her apartment bedroom, ironically, by the victim here.
Dunn looked at the dark pits of her eyes. Something kept his gaze from looking away.
Dystonia,
Miguel said, walking over to the two detectives and scratching his short brown hair.
a very severe aggressive form of dystonia.
Peterson's eyes widened, and he took a step back.
Are you saying they're infected with something? Dunn, should we be this close without protective gear?
Dunn didn't respond. He was locked on her tortured, ripped face. Miguel answered.
No, dystonia isn't contagious. It's a neurological condition that makes the muscles spasm and constrict and, in effect, contort the body. But what is troubling is that dystonia is a rare condition caused by genetic mutations, brain injuries, infections, or exposure to certain toxin.
Miguel looked her up and down. Her limbs reached into the air like burnt shrubbery.
Neither of the two women had any family history of the disease, and there were no injuries or toxicology indicators prior to their what looks to be spontaneous dystonia.
Miguel noticed Dunn's fixation and slapped his arm to break the spell. Dunn blinked, cleared his throat, and walked over to the laptop.
That's right.
Dunn said and opened the laptop.
Dystonia doesn't just hit two roommates out of the blue, especially dystonia that breaks bones to the point of wringing the blood out of a body.
Indeed, I've never seen cases like this.
Miguel offered. Peterson looked horrified and tore his attention away from the body to peek over Dunn's shoulder at the laptop that was booting up.
So you think they were targeted somehow?
Peterson asked. Dunn grunted a yes.
It's a possibility. Our leads are thin, but this laptop was the only thing with both their prints on it. It was found in the first victim's room. We never checked it after Stacy's death because it seemed to be just a horrible case of dystonia. But two victims in under a month under the same roof. That's a pattern.
The laptop booted to the desktop, and Dunn went to the system settings and brought up the event viewer on Windows. It was a little trick the IT department showed him. A window popped up, and it listed all the last used apps and processes that were done on the device.
My guess is Emily looked at something on the laptop before her symptoms started.
Dunn noticed that the Web Explorer was the last program used. He clicked open the web browser and went into search history.
Let's see what she saw.
Dunn whispered. He typed the website into the address bar and his finger hovered over the enter button. But before going further, something compelled him to glance back at Emily's twisted face, her silent howling and pleading growing louder in his mind. He wanted to solve her case. He wanted to give her some kind of peace that she couldn't find in life. And so, he hit enter. Epilogue. The Red Room was filled with people shoulder to shoulder, and I was in the center of it. The floor was concrete and cold on my feet. Every day was terror and tears. Pain. Excruciating, nauseating pain. The people would stare blankly, smothering me with their eyes, and my head would connect with each one and spin like a top. My skin rending and my world dizzying until I fell, and the rest of me crumpled into unbearable shapes. I thought I would run out of tears. I thought maybe the room would vanish one day. I hoped the door would open and I would be freed. I tried running to it, but my body never listened. Nothing ever listened to me. Not the people staring, not my body, and barely my mind. No matter how much I screamed, the Red Room controlled my voice. I knew where I was. In the moment between my windpipe being cut off and my vision turning black, only for my torture to start again, I was able to hear other voices outside the room. I hear Stacy calling for help. She must have been next door. Roommates to the end. We were in that hellish place, trapped in the website that started our hell. How many days, weeks, months, years had I been reliving my death? I lost track. As my loop dragged on, I started fixating on a spot on the ceiling before I would pass out. It was a moldy stain, but it was vaguely shaped like an X or a cross. I clung to that thought, that shape I was running to on my last day alive. I felt myself take a breath and scream in terror and pain again. I couldn't help screaming or even stop myself from experiencing the terror. It was as involuntary as everything in this room. But there was one thing the Red Room couldn't control: my thoughts. My soul, I guessed, since I'm able to think about my past and my regrets, and even that dirty stain on the ceiling despite the mechanical, almost programmed emotions I was made to feel. It was my tiny little sliver of power. So I clung on to it, fixated on that little shape, and looked up just before I was going to pass out, but not because I had to, because I wanted to. And then, one day, I decided to speak to him. And so I asked. And before the darkness covered me again, I saw the tiniest crack creep on that little stain. And inside that crack, the tiniest glint of white light shone through. I heard an angry, vengeful roar shaking the room, and as I passed out, I felt something other than pain, something beautiful. hope. Thank you for listening to my short story. If you enjoyed it, please share and like it. It really helps me out and motivates me to write more. And remember, don't hit enter.